I'm here today with Ray Stachesco. He's the CEO of Tessera, the innovation channel. Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
And so, can you tell me a little bit about your work history and your background?
Well, I come from a family of 7 siblings.
So do I.
Yeah, really? Yeah. Well, that's cool. 5 sisters and a brother. So, in our family, you got to go to work during your keep pretty early in life. I started selling paper subscriptions and had the paper outs, did all that things. As an adult, I ended up in the grocery business where I was a store manager. And, one of my prides in life is I was one of the youngest grocery store managers in Winn-Dixie's history. It's a chain in the Southeast. And, I did that for about 2 or 3 years. And I realized that, success wasn't really working 95 hours a week and, having no life at all. So I wanted to try something different. I always wanted to go into sales. So I ended up working for a company called Lanier Worldwide, and I was a sales rep in Tampa. Back in those days, you had the van, and you'd throw the copier on the cart, throw it back of the van, and off you went. Left with 2, didn't come back with any was the goal. Had a really good time doing that, won the trips for selling the most and all that kind of stuff. And I decided, there's got to be more to this, and I wasn't really sure about the corporate world because I don't play by most of the rules sometimes. Not that I break them, but I break them for the good reasons. Very disruptive in that way. So I went to work for a dealer, and then I ended up buying that dealership, and then I sold that dealership to another dealer. Actually bought back into the dealership I sold to. Spent about 6 years there, and had a really good run, had a lot of growth in that business. And when I exited out of that business, I decided, what do I want to do? So I spent some time looking at the IT services business, which in our industry of the print services, the migration is really to IT. So I really wanted to get my head around that. I was interested by it. I met a friend of mine, Milton Bartley, in Nashville, Tennessee. At that time, had a copier dealership that he was in the process of transitioning into IT. I spent 2 years with him as a COO. Learned a lot of stuff about delivering technology through a print services company or the transition thereof. And, was very, very intrigued by that. And, after I left Milton, I'm thinking, man, I really want to help my friends in the imaging channel. And I don't have all the answers, but, I find it that there's a big need in the marketplace to disrupt what we're doing so we can, move forward with today's better technologies.
Yeah, and you have such a creative mind, and I'm curious where your imagination comes from.
Well, I've got to go back to my family. With 7 kids, you don't get a lot of presents. I learned a long time ago that imagination is your mind's playground. And, if you could take your imagination and then your dreams, you could probably get creative and build something. And so I'm always looking for the way things could be based on why they should be in business. So we can all stick in the normal status quo in life, but sometimes you got to look at what could it be based on really what it should be.
And so you publish quotes every day on LinkedIn, and I'm curious, how many have you published so far?
Well, I got about 650 of them, so there's quite a few of them.
And where do you find the inspiration for the quotes every day?
A lot of people ask me that question. Those quotes really come from during the day. I'll hear something from somebody in a conversation, and it could be a good thing I hear or a bad thing I hear. But either way, there's usually a quote in there, and that's really where they come from. Just life in general, talking to people.
Wow! And what are 2 of, say, your favorite ones you posted?
Well, obviously, my end of the day and all my videos, I end with the status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. That is my favorite quote. Yeah. That was actually my first quote.
Oh, wow.
And then the other one is a company becomes obsolete when they focus on bringing the past to the future instead of bringing the future to the present. Which I wrote that quote when Sears bought Kmart. I thought, here's 2 status quo retail companies coming together during the apocalypse of, the pole economy. And, why would they invest in the sameness? Maybe Sears should have went out and bought a software company. That's kind of where that quote came from. And that applies a lot, I think, in the imaging channel today, and the IT services channel.
So where did you learn all these things about innovation?
Innovation is out there all around us. And, when I started on LinkedIn, I decided, I really got to break all the rules. I'm not going to connect with just people I know. I'm not going to connect to the groups of the industries that I'm in, and I want to look outside the borders. And, when you start subscribing to the hospitality industry or the transportation industry, and you start reading about what Uber's doing, you start reading about what Airbnb's doing, and most of this innovation is really always through a collaborative platform. And, why don't we want to learn from collaboration all around us? We can't do it with our own status quo environment that we currently live in. So I constantly study and read about it, and it's intriguing to me.
So So you're a prolific writer, and you've published over 135 articles on LinkedIn, and your writings have appeared in many publications all across the industry. And over the last few years, you've also made some really interesting predictions. And I'm curious, where do you get your insight from?
Well, the insight comes from a lot of reading. The insight comes from a lot of observations. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the insight comes from industries outside our channel and how they're transitioning. And one would have to think, well, we are going to transition the same way. We're going to go into more of a pull economy from a push economy, just like other industries are. We're going to go into more of an electronic, environment for services. Today's customer doesn't really care about how good your service is every time you show up. Today's customer cares that you don't ever have to show up for service. And so those transitions outside of our industry do apply to our industry, and that's kind of where that comes from.
Wow, it's so fascinating. And you also predicted a major retailer in the space would buy a mega dealer. The year after that, Staples bought Dex Imaging. And I'm curious, what made you think of that?
Well, that goes back to the pull and push economy, which I'm a big fan of, and really trying to get the imaging channel to understand that. Mm-hmm. But that really changed the infrastructure of what we know as the imaging channel today. And when you take a retailer that has a footprint across the country, its customers come to it and grab stuff, buy a company that goes to the customer and pushes stuff, there has to be some real disruption in that arena. Mm-hmm. And of course, Staples and Dex is not the only one. As they buy more and more of this distribution, it's going to make some major impacts. And I just looked at what Amazon was doing, and when he bought Whole Foods, he had to mix the push economy and place for people to go. At the same time, he has his pull economy. And the imaging channel's not, they're not immune from that type of innovation.
So fascinating. And also in 2017 at the RT Media Summit in China, you predicted HP would buy Xerox. Do you still believe that?
Oh yeah, and it was, I think it was 2 weeks ago, they published an article where they had talked about how HP and Xerox are tightening up their relationships and forming some partnerships. So I'm still 100%. There's a whole lot of people in the channel that disagree with that assessment. And Ray's not always right, but if we don't understand what's possible, and today possibilities are really probably probabilities. If we can't even talk about it or understand that, we're never going to be able to protect ourselves against it.
Possibilities or probabilities. I love that. Mm-hmm. So Ray, you also, you're predicting that the A4 printer and MFPs will replace 80% of the A3 MFPs in the market. You dubbed this the A4 revolution. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, that's kind of exciting. I did a talk with my friends from Lexmark, and it was in Boston, so I the revolution. It's kind of an interesting twist on that. But when you have 80% of a market that's using a product that's being delivered with what I call a product-centric mindset, because the manufacturers are geared to make A3, they're not geared to make A4. A3, there's a lot of implications when you switch from A3 to A4. Mm-hmm. But none of that matters in my mind, because if you focus on the customer and you do what could be based on what should be, it's an A4 deliverable. And when 80% of the market space could easily use an A4, the innovator is just going to come and educate that customer on the better way. And it's a big threat to the industry.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so why is no one really discussing these topics? Because they seem so disruptive.
Well, I got to just go back to my favorite quote, which isn't one of mine, so I'm not that egotistical. But there was a guy that was born in the late 1400s, Niccolo Machiavelli, and what he said was, there's nothing harder to take in hand, more peerless to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. For the innovator has many enemies, those who have done well under the old conditions, and lukewarm defenders under those who've done well in the new. And in most industries, as people talk about its disruption, there's a lot of lukewarm defenders. Those who have done well under the old conditions, they're not going to be here much longer anyway, it doesn't matter. But the lukewarm defenders are really the impediment to any innovation. And a lot of times it's because maybe they have a relationship that benefits them if they stay in the old way, and they don't really know how to go into the new way. So all these pieces and puzzle pieces are all tied together. But I think my vision is that you have your business is a bunch of puzzle pieces, and you have to fit those puzzle pieces into the customer's frame for today. And a lot of times industries are trying to jam the puzzle pieces from the past into today's frame, and they don't fit. And that's where you get that product-centric thinking. And, hopefully my friends will join in the revolution. We're getting more and more momentum as we go.
You know, Ray, you have such a wealth of information, and you have a podcast coming up soon on Test for the Innovation Channel, which I'm really excited to tune in so we can learn more about.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about that. You know, we've been kind of a little bit secret, started out with a secret meeting in the desert. It's been a little bit of a secret except for our core collaborators, but we're getting ready to bring some more of that to light. It's in process. Things are working great. We have a great coalition so far, and I'll be excited to do that podcast.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to hear it. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Gillian, it was a pleasure. Thank you.